Greetings and welcome to everyone here on our second episode of the Great North Pagan Podcast. It is Thursday, September 29th, 2011, here in the beautiful Castleton, North Dakota, the sanctuary of our studio. I'm Thomas Punton.
Man, you make that sound so nice. I'm Grant Ridgeway. We got a few things we're going to be going over today. First segment, we are going to be talking with a fellow pagan and paranormal investigator in training with the Dakota Paranormal Investigators, or DPI, and her name's Kelly Bertens.
And then we will then go to a break, and then later on we will discuss the history of Halloween, or as pagans would know of that, of Samhain. And also then thereafter we will also go over a lot of the ancestral worship that a lot of cultures go over at this time of the year. And then finally go over some of the recent events that have gone over the past month and is upcoming here in the community.
So you have your itinerary. Enjoy a little bit of music, and we'll come back with our interview with Kelly Bertens. Hey, welcome back. As I said before, our first segment here, we're going to be talking about what I would say a lot of the American population in general has been obsessed with lately, and that is ghost hunting or paranormal investigation. And so I'm going to introduce our guest that we have here tonight. As I said, her name is Kelly Bertens. She's a fellow pagan from Fargo, and Moorhead, and a paranormal investigator in training with DPI, or the Dakota Paranormal Investigators. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to meet you. All right, so how about you tell a little bit about yourself here?
Well, that's as Grant said. I am with Dakota Paranormal Investigators. I've been a practicing pagan off and on for the last 12 years. I don't know what else you want me to know about me.
Well, good enough.
Well, how about your group? What?
Dakota Paranormal Investigators is based out of Fargo. We actually have two groups. We have the main core one in Fargo, and then we have another group up in Grand Forks. Each group consists of about 8 investigators, and we travel all over North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota. I know we're trying to get an investigation going on here in Montana. So we travel everywhere.
What do you guys have going on in Montana coming up here then?
It's a hotel, restaurant, museum out there. But it's a really long drive out there. It's like a 15-hour drive to get there.
So it's like in western Montana?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very western Montana.
That'll be pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
Are you excited? Or?
I am. I'm looking forward to it.
So what drew you to ghost hunting? What excites you about it?
Well, I actually started having paranormal experiences when I was very young. So, just for me to know that I'm not crazy, that there are other people that have experienced the same thing, and maybe just looking for some answers. I'm always looking for, any kind of answer or some way that I can broaden my knowledge.
Interesting.
Would you say that it's somewhat of, for you then, it's like a validation?
Yes.
To yourself?
Yep.
Okay. I know most listeners' experience will probably vary, but I think all of us have watched several shows. The ones that come to mind are like Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures. What's that one that's Penn State?
Paranormal State.
Yeah.
And there's the A Haunting as well.
Yep.
I mean, needless to say, there's a lot, but it seems they all have a certain approach. The way that they interpret their tools and their techniques, and how they validate what evidence that they get. And I guess what I'm asking you is, how would you say DPI approaches that sort of thing with paranormal?
DPI is kind of a cross between Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures, if we want to throw out names.
Okay.
We only take a few people with us, 4 at the very max, go on an investigation. And we have, the handheld camcorders that we use. Mm-hmm. We have the stationary DVR cameras that we use as well, as the voice recorders. But we tend to go in not thinking that the place is haunted. We tend to go in trying to look for natural answers for the occurrences. So we do a little bit of that debunking as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we're kind of that mesh in between the two.
So what are some of, is there any specific... Let's start with tools. You mentioned some cameras. I don't know any of the equipment offhand other than a digital recorder. So
Right. We have a digital voice recorder that everybody carries and uses and turns on, and you'd be surprised. Let's say the three of us were on an investigation together and all three of us had a voice recorder. It could be that I catch something on my voice recorder, but it's not caught on either of your two.
Okay.
And we've had that happen. So, it's really interesting. Or we get pieces of information that correlate to one another. And that's really exciting because you're like, oh, hey, there's some validation.
Cool.
Yeah, my friend Tess Mogart had an instance like that once where the house that they live up in Granville, they had it recorded on there, and I think it was Tess's husband Garth actually said, if you could hear us, let us know, and then the recording was, thank you.
Yeah, I've always loved EVPs. I've actually tried some of that myself, or I'm assuming everybody listening knows something what EVP would be.
Electronic voice phenomenon.
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
So with that, I've tried it, and I've gotten a little nothing profound myself, but I'm not going to digress here and talk about other experiences. What other techniques do you guys use? Do you use it, do they take any sort of approach from a metaphysical sense?
No. We are based solely in the scientific stance. We did have an investigation here not that long ago of a place in Fargo where we had investigated twice and had experiences happen both times there. The third time, we had a psychic go through the building first, and we did an investigation right afterwards. There was nothing. There's nothing there anymore.
The ghost was like, I said what I had to say.
Yeah.
Based on that findings, do you think that you're more accurate than psychics usually do, or less accurate?
I don't know. I think in that instance, because there was so much activity the two times before that, and when the psychic went through, I think whatever was there just kind of went with her. She kind of took it with her and she took it out.
Okay,
sure.
And so I think that's kind of what happened in that instance, because we had so much evidence or experiences that happened there before.
And you said this was in
Fargo.
Fargo, okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, this will kind of go into my next question of how do you approach the paranormal personally, but I'm kind of jumping off. Do you feel yourself some of those techniques are useful in terms of metaphysical or psychics, or we could even go as far as to say shamanic interaction? I mean, do you prefer yourself personally approaching it from more of a scientific?
I prefer approaching it from the scientific.
Mm-hmm.
That's just more, of my nature. But I think, being a pagan helps me with it as well, because, whether it's actual spiritual energy or it's naturally occurring, energy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That, it helps protect myself from that energy,
Sure.
Energy is how you use it, and we know sometimes it's not always used for the best things.
Yeah, of course.
And sometimes that can come with you. So to try to but being a pagan, I know how to kind of ground myself. I know how to protect myself from that. So some of the other members, they say a prayer before they go in and after they get done. Some of them wear their crucifixes. We have a very broad base of different religions there, so it's just whatever is comfortable for that particular person. We don't go in and say, okay, hey, let's smudge ourselves with sage before we go in
Sure.
to protect ourselves.
Of course.
Or
does that seem to having that more eclectic approach, does that seem to make it, you guys have a bit more more cohesion as a group, or?
I think so, because we all bring in different experiences.
Sure. I could see that. I think, me personally, if I was involved with a group, I'd probably want it to be... Not that I wouldn't enjoy having all pagans, it'd be great, but I think it'd be nice to have more of different perspective.
And I think if you would run the risk, if it was all pagans, I think there would be so much energy that as the pagans you'd be generating that how do you know what is really there and what did you generate yourself?
That's true.
And I guess you cover all the bases. You get prepared from any sort of standpoint.
Yeah. Right.
For where a pagan might see it one way, a Catholic could see it a different way.
Yeah.
Well, I've thought of that for a while, because of course me and my wife and friends and stuff have talked about paranormal investigations, and the concept of like religious approach. I've always been more kind of along the mindset of, even though I'm pagan, I mean, I don't mind other religions, but I think it's kind of good because if you run into a spirit that is human, I mean, maybe that spirit was Christian, or maybe that spirit was Native American or whatever, and if you don't have anybody there that kind of could, have a personal understanding of that, would it make it more difficult or easier? I guess I'm kind of posing a question instead of a statement, but
theoretically,
let me just put on my philosopher's hat here. And you brought up a good point. A lot of the energy that we deal with, from a haunting aspect, is mostly coming from a person or people. So you have to remember that they were alive, that they have feelings. That's why you'll see in some of the ghost hunting shows that they'll acknowledge them. They'll be like, hi, this is, they talk to them like people.
Yeah.
And I think that is something important that we do have to remember too.
Yeah.
Is, that, they may not have a corporeal body, but they
were still human.
They're still human at one point.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you.
So, and if you're going with the whole aspect of, having somebody on the group that could maybe relate to that person, I guess, I don't know. We had an investigation here in South Dakota that we really wanted to do. And it happened mainly around their teenage, like 18-year-old daughter. And so the group that we had put together to go down there was all female.
Oh, okay.
Because everything was happening, to, the female. So we were like, let's try this. Let's see how this would work. To have an all-female, would we get more response than if it had been, like an all-male, or there was a couple males with, Unfortunately, we weren't able to go and do that investigation to find out. Yeah, I was really disappointed in that one because some of the claims were just awesome.
Yeah.
Were you ever dealt in a situation where it was getting out of control and you felt, if we only had this tool or this element, you could have handled it better?
I'm still so very new to the whole, ghost hunting, and like you said, I'm an investigator in training. So, my experiences have been very limited right now to just my own and the few investigations that I have been on. But I can see how going to an investigation, we could be like, man, I wish we had this tool with us. I know we have recently gotten a real-time voice recorder that will allow us to listen back immediately to see if we've gotten a response. And I know that could come in handy in quite a few different instances. Unfortunately, we only have one and we have two groups, so
Have to share it back and forth.
Yeah, we do.
You just need to get your own show and then
there we go.
All the stuff you need. You already mentioned this a little bit, but how does being pagan, does it influence your approach as it applies to ghost hunting?
I don't think so. I am very scientific minded. I mean, that's just who I am. I go in, and to me it's kind of like a theory or a hypothesis. You go in and you test. To figure out if it was true or not. And that's how I approach things, and that's how I approach a lot of everyday life.
Sure,
of course.
So I don't think being pagan affects my approach on that. I just think it gives me the tools to kind of protect myself and maybe I don't want to say manipulate the energy, but on just how to approach it.
Is it kind of maybe like a sixth sense in a sense, kind of like an extra like an extra pair of eyes in a sense?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff where I'll walk into a place, I'm like, okay, I don't like this place, and
sure, it's like empathetic kind of.
Yeah, okay. There's something not right here,
Okay, so I'm gonna throw, since you said you like theorizing, I'm gonna throw another theory out here at you. it's common belief, not only in certain areas of paganism, but also in, the metaphysical and folk community, that the veil or the boundary between our physical manifestation and spiritual or the otherworldly is at its thinnest during the times of the equinox. And obviously we just passed that, about a week ago. And have you found that this is true in your experiences as it applies to ghost hunting?
Well, like I said, I am a newbie, so I haven't really had the opportunity to experience this or to try it. Mm-hmm. I think it would be totally awesome if we could find a place that would allow us to do an investigation before the equinox, on the equinox, and right after the equinox, so we could see if there is, a difference in the evidence or the experiences that we have or anything like that. I would love to try to test that opportunity. So if there's anybody out there,
well,
contact us.
Well,
Dakota Paranormal.com.
Well, we could do that. Although the studio here actually does have a ghost cat.
Oh, really?
There used to old lady used to live here for 40 years, and she had a tuxedo cat that we learned that's named Tippy. And when the old lady passed away in 2000, the cat was sent away. But then the spirit came back, and every so often, Tippy would be seen rounding around the corners, or Marty, my own tuxedo cat, will just be meowing at it, like not towards a window or a door, just meowing at it, just a direction. Like as if he's trying to communicate with Tippy.
Well, they do say animals can see things that we can't. They can feel things that we can't. They know when there's going to be a tornado. They know when there's going to be, really bad weather. So, animals are just amazing creatures. So,
I completely agree with you on that.
Marty is seeing something.
Because I remember when we first moved up here. And we didn't have much upstairs, but Marty would go upstairs, and then all of a sudden I just hear him going, "Meow," and I would hear, "Meow, meow."
Maybe you can just throw his voice like a ventriloquist.
Either he's throwing
he's kind of dressed, he's got the little tuxedo already, right?
Well, either he's throwing the voice, or that's Tippy. That's.
No, and I know what you're saying, which would be, we can go into our next topic here. I think we all have experiences, but I want to, who doesn't like a good ghost story? So since we have you here, Kelly, do you have any cool tales that you would like to share with us?
Oh, I have a lot of them. Okay, so I guess we'll start at the very beginning. Isn't that where they say to start?
All right,
Jeff, best way to do it.
Yep. All right, so, okay. Well, this involves... myself and my nephew. I was 10 years old at the time, and my nephew was 3 or almost 3. And my sister was living out in Lakes area of Minnesota, and they were renting a house out there, and the house was right next to the church and right across the street from the cemetery. So you get, the little spooky feelings anyway, right? But, when I first walked into the house, I'm like, okay, it's not so bad. And then the further I got in, I'm like, I'm not liking it so much anymore. And, the house, it was an old house. It was a very old house, but it had an ant infestation. Ants were crawling everywhere. And then downstairs in the basement, there's a garter snake infestation, So I'm like, okay. Well, and they had a cat too, and she somehow became pregnant. They don't know how, because she's an indoor cat. She was never let outside, but she somehow became pregnant. And she actually happened to have her kittens one day while they were gone. Well, sometimes when animals feel threatened, they do things to their young.
Yeah.
And they came home, and she had, done this to her young. And so they had no idea what could be threatening her. There's nobody home. And so, that just kind of added to the whole thing. I was like, well, all right. Well, I ended up having to spend a week out there. Worst week of my life. Downstairs, and the way the house was set up, you had to walk through the dining room to get into the kitchen. And on that walkway, there was a stair, or not a stair, but an under cupboard type bathroom. And I would not use that bathroom. I refused to use it. And I would actually walk all the way around the dining room the other direction to get to the kitchen because I wouldn't walk past that bathroom.
It just gave out like this negative energy that just avoided it.
Yeah, I hated that bathroom, you know. And then when you went upstairs, I'll just try to explain the upstairs to you. It was kind of shaped in a big square or circle. And, you know, everything came, you know, right around back to the stairs. So as you came up the stairs to the left was a guest room, and that was the room that I had to stay in. Next to that was a bathroom. And directly across from the stairs was my sister's room. To the right of my sister's room was another guest room. And then to the right of the stairs was my nephew's room, who, like I said, was 3 or almost 3 at the time. In the room that I had to stay in, yeah, you got that dark feeling, like, you know, the hair on the back of your neck is standing up on end. You feel like you're being watched. You know, I never slept in that room. When I was in that room, I didn't sleep the entire week that I was there because it was so creepy. And the bathroom, you got that same feeling too. So I ended up having to use my sister's bathroom in her room because I went and used the bathroom next to the room I was stationed in. But, like, my sister's room was fine. And then that other guest bedroom, I mean, it had a completely different feel than the entire house. I mean, it felt like you had just been wrapped in your grandma's arms. I mean, it was a safe, warm, comforting feeling, you know. And I always asked her, I'm like, why can't I stay in that room? And she's like, no, that's for the guests. Well, what am I? She's like, you're my sister. I'm like, thanks. But, and then my nephew, who, you know, was very young, and I know people say that, you know, kids, they're that little, can have imaginary friends. Well, he had a friend that nobody can see, but this friend would only play with him in the closet to his room, and would only play with him, like, late at night. We're talking, like, 2 in the morning, you know, 3 in the morning.
Jeez.
Just, I mean, like, really late, early in the morning, whatever you want to call it. And then his toys would disappear and reappear downstairs in the kitchen. And the kitchen, like I said, it's a really old house, so it had those big, huge cupboards. You needed a ladder to get them down again. So, you know, it was like not him just putting them on the counter in the kitchen.
Just chucking them up there. That's really good aim.
Yeah. I'm like, you know. So, my nephew actually had his 3rd birthday while we were there. And we were all outside underneath a pine tree, and this pine tree was located next to the side of the house that, you know, the bedroom that felt really creepy was on. And we're sitting there and we're, you know, celebrating, and we're all outside. And let me just stress, all outside. And I start getting that, you know, hair on the back of your neck and the goosebumps, feeling like somebody's watching. And so I look up, and there's a figure of a man in the window to the bedroom that I was staying in. And I'm like, yeah, I never spent another night in that house. I never went back. And, you know, I kind of wish that I could go back now, you know, like find people who are living there now, see if it's still there, you know, see if they've experienced anything, if they would let us come in and investigate, just so I can see if it's still there.
Yeah.
You know?
You could write them as a thought.
I could, but I don't remember the address. I mean, we're talking.
At least look up the
24 years
general
ago.
vicinity or something like that to see if it's still standing.
Right. Well, I do know where it's at, so I guess I could always take a drive and see.
That would be cool, though.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I would really love that opportunity to see if it's still there, if there's anything, you know, that they've experienced.
Because I guess it's kind of an interesting feeling that if you're going to a place that's haunted from your childhood and then you revisit it when you've grown up.
Especially to see if you get the same feelings
Right.
as before and stuff.
But then, you know, and then I kind of wonder if I wouldn't already be tainted to it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Of
You know,
course.
like, oh, hey, I'm expecting this feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So you
kind of leading yourself
You're
almost.
Yeah.
wised up to it.
right. So, you know, it would almost be better if you could send in, like, a completely new group
Control.
control group, and then
Back!
here, you be the guinea pig.
Yeah, I can certainly say myself, you know, to add to that, there's always places, I think, that a lot of us, especially that, you know, maybe do go something or not, but like it, there's always like that place that you're like, oh, I just wish that I could, you know, like me, for example, is my work. And I'm not going to get in because we're pressed for time, but gosh, would I love to have you guys come and do something on where I work, because it's
Well,
we're always having stuff happen.
Get it cleared with supervisors or whatever, and contact us.
They never let it happen, mainly because we have residents living there.
Oh, that's true.
24/7, so-
That's right.
Well, one other place I would suggest, and that's where we once again my friend Tess Mogard up in Granville. There's a little town named Warwick near Minot. Mm-hmm. They have a little church there that's open 24 hours, and it is haunted, especially at the night. And especially if you go in there and you have someone playing on the organ, the spirits start showing up. And the first time we were up there we had Garth would play on the organ, and there would be this one couple that'd be dancing in the corner. And me and Tess even saw like this little kid that was in one of these pews that was asking, "Where's mommy?" And Tess said, "Well, mommy's probably out in the hallway looking for you." And the child just walked off into the shadows. It must have had so much activity, in theory, I guess, that it's had so many imprints.
Well, it's a church.
Yeah, church especially.
I mean,
Yeah,
you have life and death, celebrations.
Well, what a better,
happening there,
written all over that place for sure.
Yeah.
Well, to add, like even with where I work, we actually have a black figure that hangs out there. And the interesting thing is it was funny because about 6 months ago I started like telling other people I worked with, and of course they're like, yeah, right, Grant, But it's funny because there's been 2 nights now, and I just want to jump on the things with the equinox, because I fully believe that there's something with that, because I've worked at this place now for like 3 years, and every equinox the activity gets more. And I mean, granted, I guess you could say I'm leading myself, but I'm not leading myself 8 hours of my shift, when I'm dealing with residents and stuff like that. But one of our clients comes down one night and he's like, "You're gonna think I'm kind of crazy, but I'm totally serious with you." He's like, "I came out of the bathroom and there was this black figure that looked just like a human, but it wasn't like someone standing in the dark. It was an actual black mass, and it was shutting my roommate's dresser, and it just turned and looked at me and walked out the door." I mean, it gives me fucking goosebumps.
Oh my.
Yeah.
But like, I was like, no, actually, I completely believe you, because I had an experience similar to that. And then like a day later or two, another one of our coworkers, she said that she was sitting at the building across the way and she saw a black figure standing in the entryway, and she had it on camera. And she said it just stood there, and she's looking at it, and she's like just going, "What the heck?" And then she just sees it turn and walk out. And she said she went through the whole camera, couldn't find nothing, because our cameras are motion sensitive.
Oh, yep.
To recording. So yeah, that's where you can say, like, I'd love to sneak you guys in.
Right.
Really quiet and no one wake up, but
Just have me come in.
Damn HIPAA laws,
Oh, yes.
Undercover.
Oh, I know. Those are always fun.
Well,
So is there anything that you would like to cover that we didn't touch on, or that you'd like to mention, Kelly?
October 21st through the 23rd is ValleyCon. Dakota Paranormal Investigators is going to be one of their guest presenters there.
Oh, very cool.
wow.
So we're going to be showing a couple, we're going to be doing a couple panels. One of it's going to be Ghost Hunting 101, where we go through a lot of our equipment and how we use it. And then one of the other panels is we're just going to be going through evidence, like EVPs, and showing pictures and video
Cool.
and stuff like that.
Okay,
And is
interesting.
that going to be the whole weekend of ValleyCon, or is it going to be one of the, days specifically?
We're going to be doing the presentations Saturday and Sunday. We do have something kind of planned for Friday, but it's not 100% certain yet.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want to mention anything and then
Ghost
have
in a
it,
jar? No,
then not have it go through, But come on down to ValleyCon. I'm giving you a little plug there.
Cool.
And if anyone listening out there in the Fargo-Moorhead area, or even the Grand Forks area, has some issues you'd like us to come out, do an investigation, you can contact us at www.dakotaparanormal.com.
Great.
Great.
And I have one more question for you here too. Oh, I can't remember. Anyways, to our listeners, if you guys have any questions, of course, please email us. We're always looking for your opinions. If you have anything specifically for the DIP or Dakota Paranormal investigations, you can email us, and we will make sure that gets to Kelly or
Yep. And
someone in your group, of course.
Yep, our email is at greatnorthpagan@live.com.
So I think with that, unless you guys got something to add,
I think that pretty much covers it for me.
I'm good.
Thanks for coming on, Kelly.
Yep.
Well,
It was a great pleasure for you to be on our show.
Thank you very much for having me. It was fun.
Now you guys go out there and go hunting. Here's a little bit of music to take you away. We'll be back in just a little bit with our next segment.
Krummisvar í klettagjá, kaldri vetrar nóttu á, verður margt að meini, fyrr en dagur fagur rann, freðin nefið dregur hann, undan stórum steini, allt frosið út í gór, ekkert fæst við ströndum vor, svengir mekki mína, ef að húsum eineg fer, heima frakkur vannar mér, seppur sorpað tína, öll þakin í sig jörð, ekki séð á holta börn, fleygir fuglar geta, en þó leikir út mó, auðar hvergi lítur tó, hvað á hrafnar eta, sálaður á síður lá, sauður feitur garði hjá, fyrrum frár á verki, krunk, krunk, nafnar komin hér, krunk, krunk, frí og spúin krás á köldu sverli,
Okay, welcome back, guys. That was a traditional Icelandic folk song about two ravens, which we thought was pretty fitting to lead us into this next segment we're going to be doing on ancestor worship.
You know, it's common practice nowadays that you typically just have your simple funeral at a memorial site and that's about it. But we've evolved from a lot of different practices that from back in the day that were a lot more ceremonial in respect for their ancestors from where we came from, because of course if it weren't for our ancestors there would be no us.
Yeah, I think I've heard there's a pretty well-known author, at least in kind of contemporary heathenry, known as Raven Caldera, and to quote him, he said once, which I do agree with and applies across the board, that we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. I think though, when you bring up ancestor worship, I don't know if you've ever run across this, is people seem to think that this somehow implies that like you have, it's a bunch of bowing and worshiping, and I suppose with most people that are pagan, probably not, but I think with when it's brought up in terms to be fair, Abrahamic religion,
yeah,
it's more seen as like, oh, you can't worship your ancestors like you're worshiping God or something like that. Okay, well, put that out of your mind. That's nothing to do with paganism. So, I think me and you sat here kind of how would we tackle this whole thing, because this is really a broad subject.
And there's different varieties on top of that. But despite the fact there's different varieties, there are also different likenesses, or from what I've seen and researched myself.
Yeah, I think you see, I think it really depends on the specific tradition. But I mean, me personally, to get into a little bit of ancestor worship, we first have to look at, what is, because sometimes I think people get confused between what would be spirits, or anything from like a nature spirit to the Shi or the fairies or whatever you practice, and one's ancestors. I mean, there is a distinction, but you can also get into some like reconstructionist-based traditions, such as like Norse or Asatru specifically, or like Icelandic, Fornsad, Celtic, name your culture, and they sometimes have some cross-pollination. For example, in the Norse tradition, they would say that like some view the Alfs or the Alfr is, even though they're said to be spirits of nature, that those are our male ancestors. These are our male human ancestors. But I think the distinction, before we digress, should be that ancestor worship is specifically to something that is of someone's. It's a past human being that has passed on. It has not reincarnated yet into the physical manifestation. Now, this doesn't mean that it has to be someone in your family line.
No. It could be someone that's maybe was like a close member of the family, maybe someone that fought alongside in a great war, perhaps.
Yep, I mean, I think sometimes too, like I've spoken with some, being a member of our Troth, which is a specific heathen, more of a Reconstructionist type point. There's always arguments on there, about it has to be specific to my ancestors and yeah. Oh,
but anyway,
yeah. Sorry about that. I know there's arguments that they have with it, and I kind of lost my train of thought here.
That there was like different debates upon.
Well, and this should be someone's family line, which I don't think is true, because you could have someone who's, let's say, completely, Caucasian or of Western European origin, and they maybe feel a real connection to, like Vedic or Hinduism, and they have nothing to do with any sort of Indian bloodline, and so sometimes I think people feel alienated from using, I'm talking to my ancestors which aren't Indian. Well, that they don't have to be, and they don't have to be necessarily your blood ancestors, because if we go far enough back, we know that everybody eventually started with the Proto-Indo-Europeans, and that migration is out into the different parts of Europe and the continents is what created us.
Of course.
These different specific cultures. So anyways, we just had Walk in with us. I don't know if you want us to say your name or not, but
that's okay.
Okay. We have a friend here with us.
We have Jamie with us here.
And she's gonna pipe in, I guess.
Sure, why not?
Okay. We're talking about ancestor worship. Is there anything that you would like to put in, maybe like your personal practice or your views on it, or?
Well, it's actually something that's becoming more and more interesting to me. A more and more interesting idea, and it kind of sprang from the last time I was visiting with my grandmother, who's about 91 years old. And we have relatives over in Scotland that have done a bunch of research about the Donaghy family line and their history and what happened. And the stories are very fascinating. And another thing that's kind of got me thinking about it was there's a show on NBC, something to the effect of Who Do You Think You Are? I think the show is called. And these celebrities, they go and they research their different family trees and where they came from. And it's just fascinating. And these people have all of these really deep spiritual experiences. So I think it's important to know where you come from. I think that's it gives you a deeper, what's the word I'm looking for?
Heritage?
Not heritage.
I think it enriches.
Enrichment.
It does.
Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yes, it enriches. It's something that can definitely enrich your own individual spiritual practice.
Yeah, I agree, because my mother did our family genealogy that's dated mostly from Scotland and a little bit European. I mean, we do have some royal blood, and we're descended from like Malcolm and Donalbain from the Shakespearean play Macbeth.
Oh, cool.
From them in real life, we were descended from them, and
but no relation to the Putnams in Salem, right?
No, don't get me started on that.
I'm just poking fun at you.
No, although we do have the first baby born in the Mayflower was one of our ancestors, so
that's cool.
They probably were in the neighborhood, though.
I think what you added, Jamie, is the perfect point. That not necessarily somebody has, it depends on the tradition, of course, of how important ancestor reverence or worship is. But I think you highlighted a great point, is that even if it is just a little bit, it enriches what we're practicing. Because let's face it, regardless of how constructed our personal tradition may be, that we're inspired by, not maybe directly our blood ancestors, but our pagan ancestors of that culture. And I think that's really important.
Well, another aspect of it is know thyself. My grandmother told me that she was not somebody that ever could stay still in one place for very long. She needed to see the world, and she needed that from a very, very early age. And it kind of brought home the fact that I'm the same way. That's fundamentally part of my nature, is that I need that.
Sure.
And it, it's very interesting to see how other family members have those same traits, those same needs, those same desires. So it not only enriches your spiritual practice, but I think it ultimately enriches the knowledge that you have of yourself.
For sure. I don't disagree at all with that. And I think it too, that's we look at the 8, commonly accepted holy days or sacred days in that's commonly practiced in paganism, and there's at least 2 for sure that revolve quite a bit around reverence for one's ancestors. I mean, Samhain or Hallows, obviously, and I know I can't speak for other traditions, but I know especially in the heathen tradition, Yule, the first night of Yule is usually called Dizzer's Night, and it's reverence for your feminine ancestors. I don't know if you guys have anything to add with that. Obviously Norse is where I have most of my information, but...
one thing interesting I noticed when I was looking for Celtic afterlife traditions, which correlates with a lot of others, is that the Celtic burial practices, which included burying food, weapons, and ornaments with the dead, suggested a belief in life after death, which there's a lot of beliefs, like the Egyptians do believe in that, and a few others.
I think it's, which I think we should go into next, is if you guys want to share, if you don't practice something like this and you want to, what are some simple ways that you can incorporate? If you don't like the term ancestor worship, but at least reverence for one's ancestors, what are some of the things that we can do or you guys do personally? I myself know that whenever I give an offering, I have a specific separate altar in my home for the spirits of the land, but I also have images and stuff there for my ancestors. Basically because I don't have a burial mound that I can go sit on like my ancestors did. All my ancestors are buried in. So I figured the best next thing that I can do is create some sort of symbolic place that could maybe be mound-ish. And so that's why I have this altar with, things from nature and stuff like that. And
well, I know this is going to maybe sound a little bit sentimental and Hallmark-cardish, but many of us do have grandparents or parents that have knowledge to share, and I think it's important that people ask about their family history and be aware of it.
Certainly.
Of course. Well, I know one tradition that my family always does is on Memorial Day, we have a lot of on the Punton family side, a lot of our graves in Buffalo, that we go out there and replant the flowers out there to give remembrance to them, especially one of our family members that fought in World War I. Especially. And then also my great-great-grandfather who immigrated over from Scotland, who I was named after, that we always will go there every Memorial Day to give remembrance for them. Just, simple means of just kind of saying, thanks for getting there. And it does kind of make you feel like that they're there to just say, hey, nice seeing you again. Hope you stop by.
Well, I think another thing that can be added, which I've seen and done myself, but some groups really get into it, is taking some of our modern holidays and treating those as what we would treat the 8 Sabbats. Such as I've seen on Veterans Day, people actually do a grand ritual of contact and reverence for, the soldiers and such that have given their lives for this country, as well as any family members and stuff like that, and paying reverence to it. Obviously that's done, and I know about it more because I am in heathen circles, and you have the whole thing with the Inheriar and stuff. But I've even seen with Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I've seen groups that practice more of a, an African American or what have you want to call it, will have a sacred day or sacred feast specifically on that day, which I think is really neat. Because if you look through history, and even you could even do it as far as to a specific family member that's more recent. So I think if you just look at the calendar of what you have in your family or what holidays we have, there's no reason why we can't claim those and turn them into something that could be bigger than just going, okay, I get an extra day off of work,
Well, I remember how they, in Mexico, they will have their Day of the Dead, where that if they have a family member that has passed away, they'll have a literal altar of the stuff that they liked. Like, for example, if I died and there was going to be an altar, there'd be my computer, my NES, a slice of pizza, because that was one of my favorite foods. The things that I liked in life that they would kind of give as a blessing. is that they would do as a kind of as a memorial.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the perspective, if we get into what would be a pagan perspective from what is a modern day perspective, is that when our family members die, or those who have died, that maybe we didn't even know that they aren't just gone, that they're still here influencing us. They can still hear us. And, most paganism, or people that practice paganism, have some belief in reincarnation. So the fact that, treating the approach as being more, I'm not just talking to myself, but I'm talking to my ancestors or spirits of my ancestors the same as I would talk to any divinity or any, nature spirit or what have you.
Well, they're also closer, and these are people that you have a connection with, so it makes sense that they would be willing to be spirit guides or people that would point you in the right direction. And if they're willing and able to help you, then there's the perfect spirit guide right there.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Sometimes I always wondered about that with my cat Marty, because he always felt he was much more intelligent than most cats are. It seemed like he understood me, and I sometimes would sit there and look at him. Do I know you from another place, or do you know me like from down the line, perhaps?
Well, I think to even add to like what you said, I mean, all you have to do is pick up a book on probably a large majority of a traditional pagan culture, and they have some sort of custom or belief that, essentially one of your family members who has passed becomes like the guiding spirit, like you mentioned, for the head of the household or what have you. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think there's enough correlation between cultures to see that that's something that isn't just by happenstance. There's got to be some sort of precedence to that. That's all I got, and I suppose we're trying to keep this a bit shorter. Is there anything that you would like to add, Jamie?
No, sir. I really don't.
Okay. Well, thanks. No. And Thomas, that's all I got.
No, that's it. The other thing I noticed about like the Celtic afterlife is that it says the common factor in later mythologies from Christian and Celtic nations was the other world. This was the realm that the fairy folk and supernatural beings would entice humans to enter into the realm. Sometimes this other world was claimed to exist underground, whilst at other times it was said to lie far to the west. Several scholars have suggested the other world was the Celtic afterlife, although there's no direct evidence to prove this. I looked further. There was in Welsh mythology, there is this one god, which I can't remember, it was like Arwen or Arwan, that basically when you saw the geese flying south for the winter, that they were basically, it was Arwen taking the ones that had departed to the other world. Mm-hmm. It was like that passing.
Especially in Celtic, because you have such a belief like their three worlds were land, sea, and sky. And sea, especially if they saw anything bearing over the sea, that was the realm to the other worlds, to the the afterlife, if you will. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff like that. Obviously, we're covering a massive topic in a very short period of time. So if you're listening and this is something you want to know more about, if you don't practice it, then hop on Google or Amazon, or pick the brain of your coven members or your what have you, and I'm sure they can get you. Obviously, send us questions if you have any questions. What was our email again?
It is thegreatnorthpagan@live.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll be going on to our next segment here on the history and some information about Halloween.
All right. Now we're getting to the segment about the history of Halloween. It's basically what we all well know about it. The common tradition where you have your children going around trick-or-treating for candy at every house or car, sometimes nowadays. But where did it really come from? The name Halloween, or Hallowen, or as they call in Ireland, means All Hallows Eve, or the night before the All Hallows, as called All Hallowens, or All Saints, or All Souls Day, observed on November the 1st. In Old English, the word Hallow meant sanctify. Mm-hmm. Roman Catholics and Presbyterian Lutherans all observe All Hallows Day and all of the saints in heaven, known or unknown, and they consider it as the solemnity as one of the most significant observances of the church year. I mean, it did, and it basically had evolved from that, and then basically in Welsh, as Knights of the Winter would come along, Samhain, I keep on wanting to call it Solomon, but Samhain is pronounced. All Hallowtide, the Feast of the Dead in pagan and Christian times, symbolized the close of harvest and the initiation of the winter season, lasting until May, during which troops, especially Finn, were quartered. Fairies were imagined and particularly active in the season, as like I mentioned beforehand. From half the year is reckoned all the fairy Moonfire, snow goddess. The Scottish Gaelic dictionary defines as Hallowtide, the feast of Solo, which is Solemn plus Fuin equals end of summer. Contrary to the information published by many organizations, there is no archaeological or literary evidence to indicate that Solomon was a deity. The Celtic gods of the dead were Gwyn, and hopefully forgive me if I do not pronounce this right, were Gwyn Abnud for the British, or Arwen for the Welsh. The Irish did not have a Lord of Death as such. Thus were the customs connected with the day of the remnants of the ancient religions, beliefs, and rituals. First were the Druids, and then among the Roman Christians who conquered them. So then when did trick-or-treating come into this? Well, the modern custom of trick-or-treating had its origins from a number of practices, as old Irish custom would go from door to door collecting money, bread, cake, or food in preparation for the festival of St. Columcille. A 9th century practice called souling on the 2nd of November, early Christians would walk from village to village begging from soul cakes which were made from bread and currants. The more soul cakes the Christians collected, the more prayers were promised to say in memory of the dead relatives of the donors. Now today, Christians dressed in costumes, the more traditional witches and ghosts were often replaced by your latest superhero or Disney princess or Power Ranger, as they go from door to door in hope of being given small treats or a trick to be fooled. Now, this is just an interesting statistic that in 2006, U.S. consumers spent $4.96 billion on Halloween festivities, a far cry from the bonfires of animal skin costumes and of the Celts. So we've come a long way since just the simple, just saying, come across, spend the soul to dunking the apples of the apple trees and getting the...
That is for certain. And again, I was never allowed to have tricks when I went trick-or-treating. It was just treats or nothing.
No, I was
deprived. I know.
When I was lucky to be Charlie Brown, I usually got the rock.
I think there's, though, like, stuff that is kind of, I think bears the note, though, is, like, not only is Samhain or Hallows or dependent on what you want to use, but, like, especially with the Norse, they called it winter nights. Far in the Northern Europeans, they didn't have 4 seasons, they had 2. They had summer and winter. And hence why you had Beltane being the beginning of summer, or Walpurgisnacht, as they would call it in Norse. And that's why Midsummer or Litha was always called Midsummer, because it was in the middle of summer. Now, for us that live up north here, it's not so much the case. It's more beginning of summer than it is the middle of summer.
Right.
But I mean, that's like, the same holds true as it was like the ending. I think in Celtic, isn't it too? That's the beginning. That's the Celtic New Year.
Yeah.
That's Samhain, isn't it?
And well, you have to factor in back then. They didn't have satellites or weathermen at that time. At that time, when the days started to shorten down, it used to have been believed that that was the time when the Earth was going to go to rest, when it would go colder and colder, and that the harvest is done. What we can do is just keep warm and give thanks to those that are sleeping just as much as the Earth is, until Beltane, when everything would start to pick up again.
Right, definitely mimicking the natural cycles that are around them. Like I know, especially for again, my obsession with the Norse tradition was the abundance of like stored grains, as well as I think that the interesting thing to add too is you look at our ancestors, like you mentioned about the cycles, like we now can look at a calendar and see when Halloween is, but it was usually based in a lot of Northern European, specifically cultures. It was the first full moon after the equinox. So I mean, I think that bear in mind to keep that we have it a heck of a lot easier, but that's kind of where like I sit and like when I look at stuff and I'm like, do I want to stay traditional or not? I kind of use this saying like, what would the Saxons do?
Well,
because if they had what we have now, they'd probably use it. You know.
Well, traditions always started somewhere. You know.
Yeah.
Well, an interesting fact I also found this. I found this on CelticCallings.com is that in Ireland, where Halloween began, the first jack-o'-lanterns weren't always made out of pumpkins. They were actually made out of rutabagas, potatoes, turnips, and even beets. There's an old 18th century Irish legend. Yeah. There's an old 18th century Irish legend about a man named Stingy Jack who was too mean to get into heaven, and he played too many tricks on the devil to go to hell. When he died, he had to walk the earth carrying a lantern made out of a turnip with a burning coal inside. Stingy Jack became known as the Jack-o'-lantern or Jack-o'-lantern. From this legend came the Irish tradition of placing jack-o'-lanterns made of turnips and other vegetables in the windows by the doors of Halloween. The jack-o'-lanterns are meant to scare away Stingy Jack and all the other spirits who said to walk the earth that night. It wasn't until the tradition was brought to the United States by Irish immigrants in the late 1800s that pumpkins, which were abundant, were made into jack-o'-lanterns.
But see, there's a real dark, I mean, we're laughing about it, but there's a real dark element to that story. You know, where does Jack belong? He doesn't really belong in heaven, and he doesn't really belong in hell. So he's wandering the earth, and
no one wants him in.
No one wants him in. I mean,
he's just a real misunderstood fella.
You know, isn't that what everybody's ultimately afraid of? Is not belonging someplace?
Or just to be forever haunted to be wanted.
I think and to connect that with like the jack-o'-lanterns is, I mean, it was a Celtic fire festival, but the burning of the fires was more of a beacon because it was a feast time with one's ancestors. So, I mean, like as you mentioned with the story, we see an evolution of one tradition turning into another. You know, and we lose sight and kind of lose those of history, which again I think goes back to kind of why it's important to remember not only your ancestors but the history that comes with that. You know, to reclaim a bit of, okay, this is where the tradition is now. Where does it come from? Well,
especially with our generation, as much we've seen that nowadays that when we were growing up, that we would trick or treat by house, and nowadays they do it by car, or going to like the mall as a means of trick or treating. Not that I'm necessarily that.
So our ancestors
wrong.
went to the potato farm, or
the potato farm, exactly, or turnip farm, or either which.
Get some potatoes, kids! Yay!
Get those radishes out and make those nice radish rosette jack-o'-lanterns.
I hate turnips. I don't know if you like turnips, but
I actually do like turnips.
I give credit to those people for eating that. But then again, I suppose if that's all I had, I'd eat it. But anyways, side note.
Well, when I was working for the casino up in Newtown, friends of mine that I stayed with on Hallows Night, they would go out to their ancestors' graves and spread candy over the graves, and then on All Saints Day they would go and pick it up, and then they would eat it.
Oh, so like a blessing almost.
It was like an offering to their ancestors, and they were Arikara and Episcopal, so that was really interesting to be part of that. So yeah, there's, you know, I like the idea of, you know, universal on this eve, you know, of different traditions and different beliefs or religions giving, you know, their offerings to their ancestors. It's not just the pagans that do it. It's a lot of other, you know, different people from different nations, different cultures.
Certainly.
Too.
Certainly. Good point. You wouldn't mind telling us your name just so everybody knows who's talking, would you?
No, I want to be anonymous. No, my name is Azure Star. I'm part of the FMUU Pagans, and I also help out with the Fargo Pagan Pride Day. I have my hands in many things, but a lot of people know me as Azure Star, or otherwise you can call me Joy.
Cool, thanks, Joy.
Thanks, Joy.
Well, that's, again, that's about all I got, unless we wanted to turn this into about an hour-long discussion.
No.
Did anybody else have anything that they would like to add?
Not like.
As we all look at each other.
Yeah, we're all
give each
just
other
looking at
look.
it back and forth and all this, but.
Cue the professor.
Well, actually, I do have something that I would like to add, because I've been thinking about this, because I'm supposed to talk about this at Witchy Wednesday next week. And I think that the reason why we still celebrate Halloween here in this country is because we are a society that does not like to think about dying or getting old. Those subjects have become very taboo to us, and we've sort of lost the idea that everyone and everything dies, and it's a normal part of the life cycle. And I don't mean to be morbid here, but I think that those kind of darker issues, or those kind of darker things, are not something that can be ignored in this life. And what Halloween does is it gives us a safe outlet to kind of explore the unknown, or death, or the things that frighten us.
The bump in the night.
The bump in the night.
Well, and it's safe to say that what ultimately scares us thrills us in one sense as well, to be able to do it in a safe, as you said, kind of way. I mean, otherwise, why would horror movies and all these ghost hunter shows, as you mentioned, and stuff, be so popular?
Big hits.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all we got now for this podcast. Getting kind of tired.
Long and dark night.
The next podcast, as far as when it's going to be aired, you're asking? We're going to be recording probably, I'm thinking, the end of October, sometime before the 31st. But won't be released until November. But I wanted to invite, as always, anybody who's listening, if you have any questions, comments, or anything that you would like to see or hear, or like us to answer even, or if you'd like to come on for an interview or such, please email us or get a hold of us some way.
Yeah, you can contact us by greatnorthpagan@live.com. We also have a page on paganspace.net. Just look up Great North Pagan there. And then we also have the Twitter page of North Pagan Podcast as well. To close us out here, before we let you go, we want to tell you about a few things that have been happening this past month and upcoming month here. Me and Joy went down to the Twin Cities for the Twin Cities Pagan Pride Day, which I thought was really good.
It was awesome. The previous years, they had been inside in 2 different buildings. One was the Lake Harriet Spiritual Center, which was really nice, but a lot of stair climbing and people that are mobily, challenged. It was a challenge for them. So from my understanding of talking to the organizer of the Pagan Pride, they decided to bring it to the Minnehaha Falls Park, and it was a fabulous choice because there was so much room, and a lot of the public there too came and asked questions to various vendors and people that were wearing anything that was paganish. And I mean, Thomas and I went across the street to the Dairy Queen, and a guy in line was trying to be a little snarky with me about being pagan and asking why and how I was, proud to be pagan, and I gave him my little spiel right back and surprised him. But everybody else around us was really seriously listening to what I had to say. So it was, people that didn't have any intentions of being there were getting information about pagans and why pagans were proud to call themselves that. And we had a lot of onlookers that were fun. I mean, they had a lot of activities. They didn't have so much seminars like they had in the past because they've spun off into Paganiscon. That's their seminar part of Pagan Pride now, and that is, if I remember correctly, in March. And so there's something, if you guys want to look forward to something, going to some seminars. Last year was awesome from a lot of people that have went that I talked to said, and this year I'm not missing that one. We had great music down there.
Oh gosh, lots of wonderful musicians that played.
Interesting little rituals going on. They had one for the kids. They had an opening ritual which we had just missed, and then we had the midday ritual that Thomas and I went to with the celestial. What was it? The ladies of the celestial fire.
And they did a nice Grecian theme, which I myself had never got a chance to see. I mean, I've seen Celtic, I've seen Egyptian, I've seen some of those in between. And that was the first one I saw of the Grecian. And I did some studies in Greek mythology, so it was interesting to see that one.
Yeah.
And then the other big event they also had there was a labyrinth.
Yes, that was fun.
Labyrinths are a blast.
If you guys can go on the Fargo Pagan Pride Facebook page, you'll see some pictures of the labyrinth. When I walked through it, I took a lot of pictures, but the better pictures I posted on there of that. Celia Ferran, I think her name is. She was one of the major musicians that they had there, and she was awesome. I would have liked to have gotten one of her CDs, but most of my money went in getting down there, so.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
Yeah, there were some nice vendors, especially that sword vendor too.
Yes.
That had some nice swords that is like, oh, I wish it was loaded. But all in all, I thought they did a very remarkable job.
Yep.
And it was for, after we did our Pagan Pride Day, it was something that we could learn from as well.
Exactly. I guess concluding that, more closer to our area, is that the Lake Agassiz Pagan community is having a Samhain bash. And it is the 21st of October at the Fargo Moorhead, or Fargo UU Church, from 6:30 to 10:30. So anybody in the area that wants to come, you're invited. Just look it up on either the Facebook page, or if you're a meetup member, you can look them up on the meetup page and find it, and contact the host, which is Grant or Heather.
www.meetup.com, and just search Lake Agassiz Pagan Community, or meetups for that matter in the Fargo Moorhead area, and you'll be able to find us.
And they have other things coming up too. That's pretty much all that we have for now until the next podcast of what's coming up.
It's coming up, yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that, guys.
Yeah.
I wish I could have gone.
Oh, it was
envious.
It was so fun. Oh my god. Oh my goddess.
But as always, if you're a listener, get online, and if for like 12 Houses and Bridget's house and some of the other healing centers and stuff that aren't coming to mind right now in Fargo, Toshi's. Get out there and check out what they got going on. There's always events.
Fargo Rocks, which was JT's Rock Shop, is now open in there doing some kind of like tarot readings and stuff like that.
I stopped in there recently, and they really got it going good. So,
and also Doorways 2 in Jamestown. Mm-hmm. I had actually, before we did the podcast, I lit some incense that I had bought from there, and they are really picking up. I've been seeing their posts on Facebook that their classes they've been holding Sundays has been really taking off.
Cool. And
they've been branching out from work being open from 2 days to 3. And they've been really been popular in the community too.
That's great. So guys, I know we all try to save our money, but hey, go buy some incense at least once a month from your local pagan suppliers, just so we can help help keep them in business.
As a certain wine person saying, thank you for your support.
Yeah.
Yep. And also, don't forget about Witchy Wednesday on Wednesdays. You can find us on Facebook if you search Witchy Wednesday. And we're just a social group. Sometimes we have people that get up and do presentations, but mostly we meet for coffee and hang out. And it's a good way to meet other people in your community. So if you're feeling like you're alone and you just want someone to talk to, we're there on Wednesdays.
Great. So with that, I think that concludes our October podcast.
Yes, it is.
We thank you to all you guys listening to us. And again, please email us. Let us know what you think. If you have any questions. If you know someone who'd like to be interviewed, especially if you're a business owner or something, we'd love to have you in. So with that, we wish you a happy Samhain, Hallows, winter nights, whatever term you call it.
Holiday.
Happy holiday. And we leave you with a little bit of music from Lorena McKinnott.
Also, this is Thomas Punton.
And Grand Ridgeway.
Sign off.
See you next time.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Hail!